Hello, I'm Helen Dry and I'm a silver clay artist and a silversmith. My company name is Silver and Stone Jewellery Design and I'm based near York. I also co-run the PMC studio with Julie Holt, and we're putting together lots of different training programs for the PMC studio, and we're putting together lots of different projects as well. So this is one that I was really keen to do at this time of year. We've got Mother's Day coming up and Valentine's. So a really nice heart project is a great idea, and you can do it for a loved one or a friend or your mum. So on top of the basic silver clay kit, I've got some hearts here. So I've got some small hearts of different sizes, and I've got tiny heart-shaped cubic zirconia. Nice red one for Valentine's Day. And I'm going to be using PMC Flex. And this is something that I use quite often. It's the standard PMC 3 formula, but it's got that flexibility within it. So it's a nice one to use for any type of project, really. The texture I'm going to use is one that you can basically get at a DIY store. It's wallpaper, but some of these wallpaper textures are just gorgeous. So that's what I'm going to use. And to start off with, I'm going to balm my cutters, and all I do for that is just balm around the edge, and this will stop the clay sticking to the cutters. And these diddy ones, you just basically dab a bit around the end. They're quite hard. Some of the balm, or you could use olive oil as well, onto your Teflon sheet. And we'll use some on our texture, all just to stop the clay sticking. There we go. Any excess, just rub it on your hands. It is basically a hand salve. So I've got my clay here, and I'm just going to roll that out. So you'll see these bars here are so that I roll equally and levelly. They're at 1.5 millimeters, which is perfect for this particular project. It means that my project itself is quite deep. It's quite thick as the clay, but it is very, very handy. I'm going to use that way because we're going to make the edge quite thin of the silver pendant. So I'm going to roll this texture on, face side down, onto my clay, and I'm going to push it once quite firmly so that I get a nice texture. In actual fact, the texture on here, whoops, probably not as deep as I would like. But let's just see if our heart fits in. It just needs a little bit more. So what I'm going to do is just raise that up a little bit by putting a card underneath. And then should get a better texture. There we go. And that is deeper. So what I'm going to do is cut into straight down and straight back up to cut into the heart. None of this jiggling it around and loosening it, and then take away the excess clay. And I'm putting that underneath this little cup. It's actually a little shot glass plastic one, but you could use a little jam jar or something like that. And it's got a spritz of water inside, and it creates a little cloche. So I can put my clay underneath and it'll keep it fresh. I won't put it there because it blocks your view. So here we have our heart. And you can see the texture on there. It's quite nice and deep. So the next thing I'm going to do is cut a frame. I'm going to cut a heart out of the centre. Just trying to eyeball this. And press straight down once again. Oops. Now, unfortunately, that didn't come out as a hole, but that's what happens. So can you see? You can see I've cut into there. So I'm just going to get my needle tool just underneath the clay, and I'm going to lift that out. There we go. Now, normally I would reuse this, but I've got marks in, so I'll come back to that. So there is our main body of the heart. It looks really pretty, and I'm going to dry that. Now, you can dry on something like a food dehydrator or in the oven, or you can leave it overnight. But one thing to remember with flex is designed not to dry out too much. So you do need to make sure you dry it properly and all the way through before you fire it. For me, I'll use the food dehydrator, but quite often when I was working at home, I would use the oven on the lowest setting. So we'll do that. And I'll just put that to one side for the time being. And I'll show you how I'm going to create some little embellishments to go on it. The first one that I'm going to make, let's have a little think. I think I might make a tiny heart, and because we've got texture on the front, I'm going to make some shiny hearts. So I just need a little bit of balm on here, and what I'm using now are some just general playing cards. And I don't want my playing cards, I don't want my depth to be as deep. I'm adding these little accents on in terms of shapes, but I want them to be fairly thin. So my spacer bars are 1.5mm, and I've got 3 cards here, and believe it or not, each of the cards is 0.25mm. So by using these underneath, it means that I've got 0.75 of a millimetre that I'm rolling to, and I'm quite happy with that as a depth, because I'm only going to do some small little hearts. So the first one I might do, so you can see it's rolling out a lot longer. There's the roll. It's rolling out a lot longer, and I'm going to do one of that and one of that. And you can just peel this up, and then you can see we have our hearts here. Whoops. And we'll let that dry. The next thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to pop this back, I'll just balm it underneath so it doesn't stick. There we are. And because the clay can dry out, I'm just going to take the excess off here. And I'm putting it back under my little cloche again. But what I'd quite like to do is create something on there that I can maybe cut a heart out of. So I want quite a long and narrow bail. And I think may or may not do this freehand. We will see if it works. Fancy a bit of a pattern on my bail. There. This little tool that I'm using is a needle tool, but you can also use just a simple cocktail stick. So you can see any clay that's left over just goes straight back under my pot. So the next thing I want to do is just either find a cutter that will work on here. Actually, this is looking quite good. That will do me very nicely. And this is going to be my bail, so it'll be a little bit chunkier than a normal bail, but I think it'll be quite pretty. So I'm just going to let that dry as well. So we're getting all sorts of components. We've got the main piece, our main heart. We have a bail. So you're going to dry that a little bit. And we've got some hearts. So I will do the next piece. Move that out of the way so I don't squash it. The next piece is, where is it? Our gemstone. So I've got a little trick here. So you can see I've got my gemstone and this has a point to it. I'm just going to bring this a little bit nearer so that you can see, hopefully see a bit better. There. And what I want to do is just roll this over the top. So you can see the roller is being stopped by the gemstone. And what I'd like to do is make this gemstone and the clay deep enough so that the gemstone fits in. We want to have this nice and flush on the top because our clay is going to shrink in, and because we've got a point, as it shrinks, it can push up that point as it shrinks in. So I want this at the sides to be taller than the gemstone. So I need to just collect a few playing cards. These are, it might seem really basic, but they do their job. If you have deeper spacer bars, use deeper spacer bars. Let's see if this will go over. No, it's still stuck. So we need some more cards. Let's put another 2 on each side. Now check. Oh, just about. So one more playing card on each side will do the job. There. Right, let's try again. Yes, so that's going over. And that's what we're looking for. So I want my clay to be that deep. And I'll just find a little bit of Teflon to lay this on. There. Okay. So I have some clay here. I'm just going to move this back out again now. Have some clay. I'm just going to roll it. Just quickly put a little bit of balm on here so it doesn't stick. And because I want this quite deep, let me find something to squish it down with. Yeah. I'm just going to flatten it. And I'm going to put this heart in. This is a little bit fiddly. It's looking good. And I said before that we want things to be flat. So this is actually a ruler. And I'm just going to use this to make sure that if I pop it on here, make sure it's on the sides, that I've got a level top. Don't worry if it sticks. I want to show you this now. So you can see that's a really nice ring setting and really nice gemstone setting. And we can check whether it's flush with the top. That looks okay to me. Now you could leave it like that, or we could cut it out to a shape. In actual fact, I'm going to leave it as quite an organic shape. I was going to use one of the cutters to create a nice shape, but in actual fact, I'm not going to. I'm going to use this tissue blade here, and I'm going to cut the clay away like that. Oops. There. Now, the reason I'm using this is sometimes the cutters can drag. Actually, in fact, this is dragging. So I'm going to do it. Can you see I've twisted this whole thing? I'm trying to do it so that I can show you, because it's not easy to see. There. Now that isn't perfect, but I'm going to continue just refining this, not into a heart shape, but into more of a triangular shape, just so it's something a little bit different. So I'll do that, and I'm going to dry all my pieces. And while I dry the pieces, once they're all done, I'll come and show you how we assemble. So what we've got here is our dried pieces of silver clay. We have the main body of the heart. We have a smaller heart, diddy heart. I've refined the gemstone, which I'll show you a bit of that in a moment, and the bail. So what I did with this, I haven't actually put this in any dryer or oven. I've just let this dry naturally. And you can use something to form a sort of support for. So you could use something like I've used here, which was a straw. Or you can use something that you might have around in the studio. This is just a brush. So you can use these sorts of things as support. So when they're out of the dryer, we need to make sure that they're nicely refined. And I use a mixture of tools for this. You can do an initial wipe around with something like a baby wipe, or just a little bit of dampness on your finger. Don't, whatever you do, get it too wet, otherwise you're going to have to dry it all over again. I've used just a little sanding pad. This is a 3M gritted pad, and you can buy these in different grits like you can with sandpaper. And all I've done is very simply go around the piece and file away some edges that weren't particularly neat. So on this one, on my gemstone, if you remember, I just cut it quite roughly. And so what I'm going to do now is just finish off refining this, because there are a few bits. I'll just move those out of the way. There are a few bits here, and I just want to smooth some edges. And this side is a bit fatter than the other side. It's quite easy to take too much off if you're not careful. Just use a brush to get rid of There's those little bits of dust. And I don't know if you can see, but I'm putting mine into a pot. And these little bits of dust, they are bits of silver, so collect them, add a little bit of water to them, and you can use them to create a slip like you would in pottery. And they're very handy for fixing things together, and you'll see how we use this. I quite like the shape of that. So I'm going to assemble now, and I will be using this slip for this part of the process. I just want to check my slip is okay, so I'm just using a cocktail stick. It's actually quite thick, you see, and the edges have dried out a little bit as it's been waiting. But just if you need to, just add a spritz of water. It's just a little, doesn't matter what sort of water it is. There you go, and give it a stir. There we are. So I'm going to assemble this now. I'm just going to sit it on here. I'm going to put this on first, just because, in fact, actually I won't. I'm going to put the bail on so that I know where that's fitting, and then we'll fit everything around it. So because I didn't put this in the dryer, because it is flex, it is that little bit more flexible at the moment, and it's going to end up like that. I'll pop it on and then we can see how we're going. So I'm going to put a little bit of water here. I don't want it too soggy, it's just to help secure the join. Yeah. And I'm going to put some of this paste inside my bail. Yeah. So I'm sliding it in, and then I'm squeezing it together. So I'm just going to hold it for a few seconds. And actually a little bit wonky, so I need to move it around. I've also squashed the top a bit. There. Just want to round that off a bit. So it's quite clear there is a heart on that front. So just take your time, do any fiddling that you need to do. So I'm going to just leave that as it is, but what will happen is as that dries out, I will want to refine this. So I want to make sure that that hole is all nice and neat. I'll want to make sure that there's no gaps at the join. So around here, and the same on the back. But for the time being, that's absolutely fine. So I'm going to pop this on as well. And I think I will pop it there. So just a little bit of water at the base. That's a bit much. I'm just going to take a bit off. Use a tissue rather than your fingers. And then pop some paste on the back of the gemstone heart. Now, if I press this down on here now, we're going to damage the bail. So I'll lift it up. But when you're working at home, you could just dry in between the different stages. There we go. And then I'm going to get my tweezers and think about where I want to put things. So do I want to put this one here? Whoops. So that would go nicely there. Or here. Just might bring that a little bit nearer. Nope, that's not helping. There. I think you can see that a little bit better. Obviously, if I tip it up, it's all going to fall off. So plan where you want to pop things. That looks quite nice, central. So what I'm going to do is dry these two first, and then I will attach the others. But in the meantime, I'd like to get these really quite nice and shiny. And that's one of the things that's quite often criticised with silver clay, is that it's quite porous and it doesn't shine up as well as sterling silver. So I'm going to get some polishing papers. These are 3M polishing papers, and you'll see they are very, very well used. And I'm using the ones that are quite literally for the polishing element. Normally when we get these, they're all nice and clean and lovely. That one is a little bit cleaner. But actually, when we're polishing like this, we don't want to take too much clay off. We're more about flattening the particles of silver to make them reflective. So I'm going to take these 3, and I've got my little heart, and I'm skimming the front surface of this heart against the polishing papers. So you can see already how shiny that heart is. I'm not worrying about it sticking to my finger. It'll be fine. If anything, it helps. So that little trick didn't take long, and can you see how reflective that is now? And if I pop this on here, it really stands out. So I'm going to do the same with this little one. There. And those will really, really make a huge difference to the end result. So I am going to dry this piece that I've already done, and then I'll add these 2 elements on. So now this is out of the dryer, I'm going to add on those 2 other hearts. So this is exactly the same process that we had before. We'll put some water on the base here and here. There. I'm going to put I'll put the smaller one on first. I'm just going to put some paste on the back. Sometimes it's easier to actually apply it with the brush. So what does that look like? I just wanted to show you that if you don't like its positioning, you can move it a bit. And I don't really like symmetry, so I'm going to move this. I'm going to move it further up and just press on it. There we go, just to make sure it's in position. There you are. Now I'll put the other one on, and I was fancying this being here. So let's have a little look at that. Now I'm tempted to move it to the side. Ah, that's not bad. Yep, that works for me. So I'm going to pop that on now. Just add the paste on the back. And I think I'll use my tweezers for this bit. There. Whoops. Actually, that's moved a little bit, but I think that looks quite nice. So that's our pendant. What I will do is just go around all the edges and refine them. By refining them, I might file them down, or if there's any areas that need filling, I'll just add a little bit of paste. I just want to make sure everything is secure. So do that, and then once you've got to that point, make sure it's all dry, and then we'll look at doing some firing. So the firing, you can fire in a kiln at 700 degrees C, and you can just fire it on an open kiln shelf. So 700 degrees C for 10 minutes, or you can torch fire this because it's got a cubic zirconia, which is fireable. And you can do this, I would suggest, for about 4 minutes. Whatever you do, when it comes either out of the kiln or you finish torch firing, do not quench it, because that cubic zirconia will just crack. Okay, so that's all the dry stage to our Queen of Hearts pendant. Hello, and this is the pendant that has been fired. So if you remember, we had the cubic zirconia heart here. We had 2 little additional embellishments, and then we had this bail on the top with the little hearts out. So this is it. I've actually kiln fired this one, but you can torch fire it, as I mentioned previously. So it comes out of the firing process, unlike sterling silver, it comes out this white colour, and it's often assumed that this is an oxidisation. In actual fact, it's not oxidisation. What it is just the natural colour of the silver, and by flattening the particles of the silver, we can make this shiny and reflective again. So to do that, I'm going to use a metal brush. This one is a brass one. This one is a stainless steel. It doesn't actually matter which you use, both are effective. This one is a little bit softer than this. This one's just a tiny one that can get into crevices. Now, often when I'm brushing, I'll add some water to my brush, but rather than get everything really soggy. You see already the difference that that's made. You can see those shiny bits of silver that we'd polished up even at the clay stage and the greenware stage. They're really quite reflective now. And I just wanted to show you that that was a really quick process, really, really quick. And if you do that work in flattening the particles, making it shiny in the greenware stage, it very quickly comes up nice and shiny at this stage. And one of the criticisms of silver clay often is that it always looks a bit dull. And in actual fact, it doesn't take an awful lot of work to make it nice and shiny and flatten those particles. So I'll continue with this. Because there's lots of little embellishments, it's hard to get into the crevices, and it's also hard to, this is quite a big brush to show you. So I'll use the little one and you'll see a little bit better. This stainless steel one isn't as soft as that particular brass one. You'll find there's a variety on the market. And generally I would generally go with the brass. So try and use your little brush, if you've got a little brush, to get into the crevices. So if you can see there, that's now very shiny, but there's a lot more work that we can do to that. Now, you can use a variety of things. Traditionally, people that use silver clay will use an agate burnisher, something like that. And that's a very simple process. All that is taking your burnisher and again flattening the particles of silver to make them reflective. And you can generally get into some of the areas that are harder to get to. It's also quite handy for doing the edges. Or the inside of this veil. In actual fact, quite often I will just use a file on the inside if you've got one small enough. See, I will keep going. I'm just giving you a quick overview. So you can use it in the main around a textured area of this agate burnisher. On the back, we haven't got any texture there, and it's quite hard to get to this area of white here. So just flatten the particles with your agate burnisher. But to be fair, I like my things to be really shiny and highly polished. So quite often what we will use is a barrel polisher. So I'm going to pop this in the barrel polisher to give it a bit more of a polish. But because it's silver, you can use traditional silversmithing tools as well. So one of the things that I'll do with that, if there's any areas, I already talked about filing on the inside here. And I would certainly use radial discs and maybe some polishing compound on these shiny areas to really make them stand out. So yes, it is a lot better than it was when it came out. It's nice and shiny, but we can do lots of work to that. So use it as a starting point if you're a traditional silversmith, and if you're focused on silver clay, use things like the agate burnisher, files, and maybe things like the barrel polisher. It depends on your preference. So I hope you like my project. Lovely little gift there for Valentine's Day or for Mother's Day. Thank you. I'm Helen Dry of Silver and Stone Jewellery.